Hello? With okay. Cool. Hello everyone. How are you doing? Um, so my name is Bruno Da Hora, and it's true. That's my name, and I can prove. I can show you my ID. I have done this more than once. I showed my ID to prove that's really my name. I sometimes feel like a teenager when I say my email because it's Bruno Da Hora, and people think that I'm just like a teenager who thinks too high of himself. I'm an engineer on Pipefy, and also I'm an organizer of the Curitiba meetup, React meetup. I have some stickers from our community. If you want some React and nice sticker, you can find me at the end. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about micro-frontends, and I use the idea, the strategy of the golden circle to learn what is this and what's micro-frontends. Okay, so to start, I wanted to give a really quick and simple definition of what's micro-frontends. We'll go deeper later, but just to start, the idea of micro-frontends is to, oh, just a minute. The idea of micro-frontends is to apply the ideas of and principles of microservices to front-end codes. We know a lot about microservices. I think most everyone have heard of microservice sometime. And really simply, micro-frontend is to apply the same ideas and principles to our front-end code. Normally, we didn't think about the front-end architecture, and now with more and more complex JavaScript frameworks, we are starting to think about it. And just a little bit of story about micro-frontends. That concept, that name, appeared the first time on the 2016 Technology Radar from ThoughtWorks. It appeared as an access technique, and this year on the last Technology Radar, it became an adopt technique. So it's something that it has some years that people are starting to think, but I don't know why. I tried to discover this, but I don't know why. This year we had like a boom of lots of people talking about micro-frontends. Maybe it's more doable right now. The first time I heard about micro-frontend, it was also in 2016 on a RubyConf, where I saw the guys from global.com talking about how they divided their front end. They didn't call it micro-frontend on that year, but that's when I heard. And as everything from the from technology, we always have those who like to go really deep into the hype and say that you should do this, and if you don't do, you are dumb. And we have the other side who says that if you do this, you are dumb because that doesn't work, and you can do this in other ways. So before we go into deep into microservices, I would like to prepare the field and clear these this hype and these two extremes on micro-frontends. And when you need to decide if you are going to do micro-frontend or monolith, I would like to do some cliche phrases here. And man, it depends. There's no silver bullet. Micro-frontends is not a silver bullet, and it's not for everyone. It will work, and it will be a good strategy for some teams. And I would like to say, especially big and mature companies, but it's not for everyone. And also, it's not like our friend said some minutes ago, the free lunch is over, and we need to know that complexity never disappears. You may move the complexity using micro-frontends from your organizing your team, from your code, but maybe you will move this to the deployment and other areas, so the complexity never disappears. You can move this to other places who we can handle the complexity better, but we need to be aware that the complexity is always there. Okay, so what's the golden circle? It's a concept created by Simon Sinek in 2009 on his book. Let me remind how great leaders inspire action, and his idea is that the idea that he brought was that great leaders and nice companies, they always inspire people to use their brand, or they do what they want, because they use this idea of the golden circle, which have 3 layers. And one thing that Simon always says is that the most important part, and the one that we almost always forget, is the why. That's why he released a book last year called Start With Why. And I want to use that concept to think what's micro-frontend. So we're going to see why use micro-frontends, how to use it, and we will see a more formal definition of micro-frontend at the end. So let's start it. Also, Simon Sinek has a really nice stat about the golden circle. So I really recommend you to look into it and see if you don't know what's the golden circle. Okay, so why? What's the motivation for using micro-frontends? And before going to the advantage, why we really should use micro-frontends, I would like to share a little bit about our case on Pipefy and why we are starting to use micro-frontends, why we are starting to research and try this. And to do that, I would like to really quickly tell a little bit of Pipefy history for you guys, for you all. Pipefy was born like a Rails application. It was a full monolith Rails application. And early on, we started using React. So we have some really old React code that we are trying to get rid of. We had create class and those kinds of things. And the company started to grow. We started to have more and more nice and bigger customers. And the team grew really quickly. We kind of duplicated our team in 1 year. So we started to have more and more features as new clients arrived to use Pipefy. New features were going to be added into the application, and the application started to getting more complex and bigger. And we had like a huge monolith, and it was hard to manage that. It was hard to deploy. It was hard to test the monolith. We are getting some bad performance. In the front-end side, the bundle size started to increase a lot. We started to have some overhead of communication because some teams started to work on similar features or on the same part of the code, and it was hard to communicate how we're going to deploy it, how one feature will affect the change that the other one did. And we looked into all this situation, and we saw that we needed some strategy to change that. So in the backend, we started to working more with microservices, and we are starting to break our Rails application into different Elixir microservices, but we were still having the same problems on the front end, especially on the front end. And we were trying to think strategies to solve that. We upgraded our Webpack version. We applied better optimization, better strategies to generate our bundle. We started using code splitting, but that was not enough because we were still having problems because we have almost 15 developers working on the same code, working on the same huge code. And that's how we got into micro-frontends, and we started researching. So why should we use micro-frontends? Micro-frontends is about scaling, both technically and organizationally. The objective and the idea to use micro-frontend is to scale your application and your teams. Luca Mezzalira is the chief architect of DAZN. DAZN is a sports streaming service. They arrived in Brazil some months ago, I think. We have like some advertisement going on, and He's a really evangelist of micro-frontend, and he said that the main challenges with scaling front-end application are scale the teams, reducing the communication overhead, and innovate. So you can see that the main challenges that he shared are not totally related with the technical side. It has a lot to do with the organizational side, how you organize your team, how you divide your code, how you scale your company as a whole, not only your application. And micro-frontend is about that. You don't need probably to use micro-frontend on your startup that you kind of doesn't have any client and you are starting to do it. But for a company that's growing, that needs to scale and is having more and more teams, maybe micro-frontend is a good strategy for you. It's a good architecture for you. So let's see some advantages and some challenges of micro-frontends. The first advantage that we can see on micro-frontends, and it started to, is that we can do incremental upgrades. We can deliver upgrades or updates in small parts of our code and test it and see if it's good. Make some small changes, make experiments. Maybe you want to change like the header from your application, or maybe do an A/B test, and you can do that incrementally. Or maybe you want to use a new feature, like from the library or the language that you use, but you don't want to upgrade all your system with that new version. You can upgrade only your micro-frontend, one micro-frontend, test it, and if it's good and it works good on your code, you can move this to the other micro-frontends. Another advantage that we have is that with micro-frontends, it's easier to have a simple and decoupled code base. As you have a smaller code base, you have less code to work on. It's easier to maintain that simple, to maintain that uncoupled, and that makes the maintainability of your code better. Another advantage, which is one of the ones that I like the most, is that you can do independent deployments with micro-frontends. If you want to update your header, like I said, or you want to change a small part of your code, you don't need to deploy everything. You don't need to compile all your code just to change a small part of it. So you can do independent deployment. Another advantage is that you have autonomous teams with the micro-frontends. Each team can be responsible for a small part or a specific part of your application. And they can decide what they're going to use, how they're going to manage their process, what kind of strategy they are going to use. They don't need to sync with all the other developers and all the other teams to do a change on its code. They can work in a more autonomous way. And that certainly fosters innovation, and it makes easier to innovate into your company. If you want to try something new, you can create a new micro-frontend, maybe change one of those micro-frontends. You can do A/B tests on bigger parts of your company, and you won't have the same code being deployed to everyone. And that also improves the speed of development. When you have a small code base, when you can you have autonomous team that can know a specific business subdomain, it's easier for ramping up new developers. It's easier to make changes. It's easier to understand what's going on. It's easier to find new bugs, because you have smaller teams, more focused teams on each part of the front end. And the last advantage, which kind of aggregates almost everything that I was saying here, is that you have ownership of a specific domain. Your team can own from end to end one part of your application, and they will feel that they are owners, and they will worry if that application is running, how they can improve the performance of the code of that part of the application. So you get better ownership of code, of business from your team. But as everything, it's not only advantage, and we have some challenges when we are working with micro-frontend. The first one is really classic. We, of course, will have SEO problems. This is really similar to the problems that we have with single-page applications. And as we have with single-page applications, we have lots of strategies, lots of ideas, lots of techniques to do SEO on single-page applications and as well with micro-frontends. Another challenge that you will face is a probable design fragmentation. As each team can decide how they are going to build, as each team will work separately on different parts of the code, you may have some design fragmentation. Maybe the button will be in a way for something, for the other team they can do the button a little bit different, but that's not a challenge that only the micro-frontend faces. If you have different teams, different designers, they may do that, and we know how to solve that. Another challenge that we have, as you will have independent micro-frontends, let's say that you have 5 micro-frontends, you may have to download React or Vue or Angular 5 times, because each micro-frontend, they are independent, they have its own bundle, and you may need to download the same libraries more than once. And that will also cause some problems with the payload and bundle size. And in countries like Brazil or India, or places that we don't have a really good mobile internet, we care a lot about the bundle size and the amount of data that our users are going to download. So duplication of dependencies and the bundle size is something that we will face when we create multiple micro-frontends. Another challenge that we face is the difference in environment. What that means, when you start working with our micro-frontend, probably you run it independently. You will just want to test it, develop it, look into it, but when you're going to deploy this, to deliver this to your client, to your customer, you want to see how your micro-frontend works with and compose with the other ones. So how are you going to test it? How is your development local machine environment works? How the production environment will handle? How are you going to compose everything and test it on your machine without having to have a 32 gig memory computer? That's a challenge that we have. And one last challenge is that, of course, the complexity will increase in some areas, like we said, on the environment, on the deployment, on how your team organize itself. We will remove the complexity from some sides, like the code base, the deployment, but it will move on how we automate things and how we organize, how we define what is responsibility of each team. But nonetheless, we believe that these risks, these challenges can be managed. We already have solutions and ideas on how to solve those challenges, and we believe that the benefits and the advantage that micro-frontends brings often outweighs its costs. Of course, this depends on your team size and how your company is mature, how your development team is mature. But for the right situation, we normally think that micro-frontends, the benefits are bigger than the costs that we have. So how do we implement micro-frontends? I don't intend here to go deep on the implementations. We have different kinds of implementations for micro-frontends, but my main idea here is to show the current approaches and who are using, and some tips to start using micro-frontends. And when we are talking about the implementation of micro-frontends, it's all about orchestration. It's all about how you compose your different micro-frontends. That's one of the biggest challenges when we are talking about implementing it. And I would like to see to show you guys some current approaches, some cases that are using these kinds of approaches, how they are orchestrating and composing their micro frontends, so you can research and read about them later. On the slides that you can get later with a link that I will show you guys, I have some notes on the slides, and I have links for each of the companies and libraries, and you can go deeper into that. The first strategy is the one, called Open Components. It was created by the company called OpenTable. They are a restaurant reservation service. I think they have some places here in Brazil, but they are really strong on the US and I think on Europe. And the idea of the Open Components is that they have a registry where the micro frontends are registered, and this registry is the one responsible to compose and orchestrate how the microphones are going to be shown and send it to the browser, to the client. Another approach, which may be some surprise to you, is to use iframes. And Spotify was one using that approach. They recently changed it from iframes to a new strategy. But recently you could see on the web version of Spotify that they had lots of iframes which loads different micro frontends. So iframe may be, you may not believe it, but iframe can be a possible solution for that. Another approach is the server-side composition, which is this company Zalando, one of the most famous one using it. Zalando is like an e-commerce, is an e-commerce from Europe. They are a really big e-commerce, and they have a Go application on the backend who compose and join the micro frontends and deliver a full, complete HTML page, like server-side render to the client. Another place that we can do the composition is what we call ad-side inclusion. I think IKEA everyone knows or have heard about. And the ad-side inclusion is a tag, is an HTML tag that tells the CDN, the Content Delivery Network, to aggregate pages from different places. The one problem with this strategy is that this tag is not implemented equally by the different CDNs. So you may be stuck with your current CDN on how you implement and how the CDN implement that tag to continue using that. Also, you can do the client-side inclusion. Here we don't have anyone famous using it, but you can leave the composition for the browser. One challenge that you face here is that if the user has a bad internet, or maybe he loses some package during the access for the page, you may have a incomplete experience for your user. You may need to deal with failure, and that's kind of hard. And one last current approach that we have is the one used by Dazan. They use an orchestrator that they call Bootstrap, which I think it's a really bad name because we confuse with the library Bootstrap, and it's not the same, it's completely different, but they decided to call it that. And that orchestrator is a JavaScript library. It's a JavaScript file that is responsible to decide which page will show, which micro frontend will appear on each place, to do the API calls. So it's like a wrapper on the micro frontend that is the first thing downloaded by their application and is responsible for calling and dealing with that composition. It's almost a client-side inclusion, but with an evolution of the client-side inclusion. But there's a bonus. You could use NPM package to do micro frontends. You could have a part of your component, part of your application that's used everywhere as an NPM package, and that could be separately developed. Maybe that's not the best solution, but for some cases it makes sense to use some NPM package, and that will simplify how you deal with that. Some existing libraries that we have that implement the idea of micro-frontends. The first one that I like the most is single SPA. They are really nice. You can use Vue, Angular, React together on the same page. And the single SPA have library for all of the most famous frameworks. And it's kind of an orchestrator similar to the Bootstrap from Dazan. And it's the one responsible to calling and showing each page. The Fringe.js is a little bit similar, but you kind of draw your HTML page calling the different micro-frontends. And Mosaic 9 is the library from the guys of Zalando. So it's a server-side component. It's a Go application, if I recall it correctly. And it does the composition on the backend. Also on the slides, there's the links for each of those libraries, and you can check that. And when we are talking about micro-frontends, we are always talking about decisions. Micro-frontends has lots of trade-offs, and you have to decide on different things. And Corehouse made this post on Twitter, and I really liked it, so I copied it into the presentation with the correct referrals here. And he says that we have a spectrum of micro-frontend. You may be to the left and do what he calls strategic collaboration. If you go too far to the left, you have a monolith where you share everything. You share the tech stack, the components, the CI, maybe the logic. If you go too far to the left, so you have a monolith. And if you go to the far right, which is almost normally who don't like micro-frontends thinks it's the only option, where you have totally independent micro-frontends with different tech stacks, with different CI, CDs, and all of that. So when you are thinking about how to implement micro-frontends on your company and start to use it, you need to decide where you want to be on that spectrum. And what we are seeing is that the best implementations of micro-frontends, they are normally at the middle. They may need some technologies, but not totally independent. They may share the CD or not, but they have dumb components. Some share the API. Each micro-frontend owns its APIs or not. They normally are on the middle. You have some level of independence, but you still share, collaborate have a small collaboration between the teams. And I have some tips and some tricks that I would like to share with you guys that we are seeing that helps and simplifies and make it more easier to implement micro-frontends. The first one is that it's good to have a design and a component library. It can be like the material UI, it can be the Bootstrap, and it can be another one from a company, or even better, you can have a design system on your company. Having that simplifies a lot and avoids challenges like the design fragmentation that I said. So if you can invest that, if your company can invest on a design system, or maybe you can, you like one, like the one from Atlassian, there are a lot of companies that have design system and you can use that. On Pipefy, we have our own design and component library, and we are turning it into a design system. It's really nice. It's really helping us to have consistency on our design, and we probably will turn that library and design system as open source sometime. I think this year we will be able to do that. Another tip that we have is that when you are talking about micro-frontends, as we have on microservices, you need to automate everything. Automation is the key for success when we are talking about micro-frontends. How you orchestrate, how you create a machine for that, what you do when that fails. You need to automate your tests and everything. So to have micro-frontends, you need to have a good and mature automation process on your pipeline. Another tip is before starting or while you start, it's good to define the processes and the guidelines. How are you going to develop JavaScript code? Are you going to use ES6? Are you going to use TypeScript? How are you going to do calls on React? It's good to have a better, a more united developer experience, so you can a developer can move between teams. Another tip is that it's nice to have independency on and autonomous decisions on the tech stack, but it's easier when you agree on a limited set of technologies. Another tip here is that you should have a limited set, but you should be open to update that frequently. So maybe a new framework who can help you more appears, or you want to use like a different superset of JavaScript, I don't know, appears, and you agree with your team on a limited set of that. Another tip, which may be a little bit polemic here, is that code duplication sometimes is okay. And I like that phrase who says that duplication is far cheaper than the wrong abstraction. It's really similar to the famous phrase from Donald Knuth that says that premature optimization is the root of all evil. Sometimes you want to make a complex abstraction, but you could just copy the code between two micro-frontends. So duplicate your codes is okay sometimes. Not always. People who like dry will try to shoot stones on me, but it's okay. When we talk about micro-frontends, it may be okay to duplicate, to reduce the complexity of maybe wrong abstractions. And the last tip that I have is a reminder that we never should share logic between micro-frontends. The micro-frontends should have independent logic. One micro-frontend shouldn't interfere on the logic of another micro-frontend. They may communicate with data or things like that, but should never share logic. Okay, so we talked why we should use micro-frontends. We saw how we can implement micro-frontend, and I would like to see 3 formal definitions that we have currently about micro-frontends to see what is micro-frontend finally. The first definition that I brought here is the one from Ken Jackson. He is a consultant on ThoughtWorks, and he has a really nice blog post on Martin Fowler blog about micro-frontends. I really suggest you guys to read it later. And he says that micro-frontend is an architectural style where independently deliverable front-end applications are composed into a greater whole. So we have some important points. He calls micro-frontend as an architectural style. We are talking about architecture of front-end code right now. The micro-frontends should be independent deliverable. That's one key important feature of it. And he brings the idea of the composition of the micro-frontends into a greater whole. The second definition that I have here is from the microfrontends.org site. It's kind of the official site about the micro-frontends. It's a really nice site. They have a really nice explanation. They have an example. The Ken Jackson post also has an example. And they say that the idea behind micro-frontend is to think about a website or web app as a composition of features which are owned by independent teams. Each team has a distinct area of business or mission it cares about and specializes in. A team is cross-functional and develops its features end-to-end from database to user interface. Here he brings the idea of composition of features again, but he talks a little bit more about teams, that the teams should be independent, should be focused on a distinct area of business, and the team should be cross-functional. It's this idea that they bring of a team owning a vertical slice of your application. So here's another place you can decide. You can have like a shared database, or each team could have one specific database, but the idea of micro-frontends aggregates with the idea of microservices, that each team should be responsible for a single domain. So they will own that part of the code. And the last definition that I have here is the one from Luca Mesalira. He has a really nice course about micro-frontend. He's also writing a book on O'Reilly about micro-frontend, and his definition is micro-frontends are the technical representation of a business subdomain. They allow independent implementations with same or different technology choices. Finally, they avoid sharing logic with other subdomains, and they are owned by a single team. So here he brings the idea of the single team again, that owns a subdomain, a business subdomain, so it has a lot to do with business. You can't have only tech. He talks about the teams, and I think that it's nice that he says it can be the same or different technology. Okay, so let's wrap up here what we saw during these minutes. First, why do we use, micro-frontend is nice. It's good to scale your application and your team. Not only your application, not only your team, but your company. If your company is growing and you want to scale your company, maybe micro-frontend is a good architectural style for you. How do you implement micro-frontends? We have multiple solutions, and they mainly focus on how you orchestrate, how you compose your different micro-frontends. And you need to decide, thinking on the trade-offs. Are we going to be more autonomous? Are we going to be more collaboration? Where on the micro-front spectrum that I show you all, should we be? And what my favorite definition is the one from Luca. I think it brings the more important ideas on micro-frontends as a single team owning a business domain. So he brings a lot from the idea of domain-driven design, which is a really nice technique. And he has this opening to use the same or different technology. That's another criticism that we have. People saying, it's not good to have an open decision for every developer trying to decide whichever technology. That's another one. But it's nice. So how do we start with micro-frontends? My first tip for you is build the foundation first. Think about the processes, how you will manage the teams, the definitions, the guidelines for the tech stack that you are thinking to use. Decide where you're going to be on the spectrum, and then you can start experimenting with different approaches. Maybe for your case, server-side is better. Maybe using an orchestrator is better. And then you can start doing the strangler pattern. I don't know if you know this pattern. Here we have a link for the Martin Fowler blog post of it. But the idea is that you start breaking your application, as we do with microservices, and you start removing from the monolith the different micro-frontends until your until your monolith dies or becomes a single micro-frontend. So that's the strategy that we are using at Pipefy, and it's a really nice idea to begin. And if you want to learn more, I have some links here, the microfrontends.org site. We have some aggregator sites who have lots of blog posts, videos, talks about microfrontends. I have a link for one that I like. We have the Ken Jackson post that I talked. Luca Mesalira has also a post kind of aggregating some topics on microfrontends, and his course on microfrontends on O'Reilly takes like 3 hours. It's really nice, it's really deep, and of course O'Reilly is paid, but you can see the course on a free trial, and if you like, you can buy the rest of the platform. And I think he will have a live session on September, so you can register soon. That's it, thanks. That's what I have about microfrontends. I just have two quick announcements. First, we are hiring at Pipefy. We have an office in San Francisco, but our development office is in Curitiba. But we have remote people. We work remotely also. We have people from around the world. And you can see on our careers page, we have different positions. And I would like to talk about two events that are going to happen on Curitiba. First, we are going to have our Brazil on JS Brazil.js on the road. It will be on September 14. We will have really nice names. We will talk one day, a full day about JavaScript. And I know that Akita doesn't like Agile, but the Agile community will have a conference on November 9, and we are gonna have some really nice names. There's Alison Valley talking for us. And if you want, you can enter those links. And if you are from Curitiba, you should be on those events. Or if you are you're not from Curitiba, you should visit us. Curitiba is a really nice city, and our community is growing, and it's really nice to see those events now in Curitiba also. Okay, so thanks again. If you have questions, you can find me later. I will be with my crachá. I don't know how to say that in English, but you guys understood. And my ID, and I will prove that my name is Da Hora. Those are my social networks, and that's the link for the slides where you can see the links and look more about it. Okay, thank you. Let's talk about micro-frontends later.